Iran has carried out a ballistic missile attack on air bases housing U.S. forces in Iraq in retaliation for the U.S. killing of General Qasem Soleimani. More than a dozen missiles launched from Iran struck two air bases in Erbil and Al-Assad, west of Baghdad. It is unclear if there have been any casualties as yet, but what lies at the root of the crisis? Here is some background information on how it all started. So how did we get here? The U.S. and Iran have been long been foes. They've not had such a great relationship over the years. Problems can be traced back to at least 1979, when Iran's U.S.-backed Shah was overthrown and the country became an Islamic republic. Relations have been frosty ever since then. Well, the assassination of Iran's top military commander Qasem Soleimani, whose picture is shown there, which happened on January 3, was a major escalation in already deteriorating relations between Iran and the U.S. There was a drone strike that hit the commander Qasem Soleimani and his entourage whilst they were on their way to Iraq. Well, the general controlled Iran's proxy forces across the Middle East. He was regarded as a terrorist by the U.S. government, which says he was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American troops. And the United States of America believed that he was plotting an imminent attack. There have since been questions and demands for evidence from the Trump administration on the imminent attacks, as have been said. Well, Iran has been vowing severe revenge for the death of the commander since he died and since they put his body together for burial. Scores of people attended that funeral. In the early hours of Wednesday, Iran fired rockets at two air bases in Iraq that housed U.S. troops. It is unclear at this point if there have been any casualties, but Iraq says none of its troops were killed in those missile attacks. President Donald Trump says so far so good after a briefing with his top brass. Mr. Trump says he will make a full statement on Wednesday morning U.S. time. Well, we're yet to hear that statement, but we know that the Iranian leader has already been speaking. Well, he has described the attack on U.S. Troops, if you like, as inadequate. Well, Iran says it is retaliating for the killing of Iran's top military commander Qasem Soleimani, and any territory that is the starting point of aggressive act against Iran will be targeted. That's according to Iran. Its foreign minister says later, we do not seek escalation of war. They want to revenge, but they do not want an escalation after their own revenge going forward. Also in Iran, a Ukrainian plane with more than 170 people on board, we understand, has crashed. Well, a while back, the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah, has been speaking. He has described what happened yesterday, the missile attack, as a slap in the face of the United States of America. But he says it is not enough. There have been several responses on social media. A few hours, like I indicated, also Iran President Hassan Rouhani addressed the media saying that the missiles overnight show that the country will not retreat in the face of America. If America has committed a crime, he's quoted as saying it should know that it will receive a decisive response. Listen.
A slap was delivered last night. But what is important is that the seditious presence of America in the region should be ended.
Well, that is the Iranian leader, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei there addressing the Iranians after yesterday's missile attacks. Well, we can hear from the Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, who has been actually granting interviews across the board to Al Jazeera, to CNN, to BBC. Here's what he says.
Well, we've said very clearly that if the United States takes any further action, Iran will respond accordingly, and we will respond in a very harsh way, but proportionately. Well, we did not start this process of escalation. The United States waged an economic war against Iran. The United States has to come to its senses. The presence of Iranian people in the streets of many cities, unprecedented in the history, a sea of humanity, has to bring the United States to its senses. They should stop listening to clowns, that they should base their policy based on reality.
That is the foreign minister, Iran's foreign minister there, granting interviews to a range of media personnel the whole of yesterday. Well, there's been some reactions from the European Union as well.
The current crisis deeply affects not only the region but all of us. And the use of weapons must stop now to give space to dialogue. We all are called upon to do everything possible to rekindle talks, and there cannot be enough of that. The European Union, in its own way, has a lot to offer. We have established and time-tested relations with many actors in the region and beyond to de-escalate the situation. I'm now on my way to London. I shall meet Prime Minister Boris Johnson this afternoon. And of course, the situation in Iran and Iraq will also be a topic.
And on to what's happening in the United States of America and Iran. It's a rapidly escalating situation between the United States and Iran, despite several calls across from the world leaders for a de-escalation. Last night, missiles were seen flying towards a U.S. military base in Iraq. And although casualties have yet to be reported, it appears a retaliation by Iran has already begun for the assassination of its top military commander on January 3. It seems the brink of war already, and there is just a lot to talk about already. The hashtag Say No to World War III is trending on social media. Let's begin this conversation with the reactions and interventions from the EU. Thomas Sparrow is political correspondent with our partners DW, joining us all the way from Berlin. Thomas, generally, what has been Europe's reaction to this escalating tension?
If I had to describe with one word what Europe's reaction has been so far, I would say that word is restraint. They have been asking time and time again in different formats, in different statements, for both Iran and the US to act with restraint, to try and do everything possible to try and de-escalate and avoid further violence. That's something that we've seen, as I say, from various different officials, but more generally, if you look at the big picture, Gifty, you can clearly see that Europe finds itself between a rock and a hard place. They're trying to balance its interests with both the United States and Iran, two countries that are very important for the EU, but that are also particularly problematic for the EU. The EU and the US have not seen eye to eye on various issues in recent times, and at the same time, obviously, the international community is aware of Iran's role in the region, and that's something that they're trying in a way to balance out, how they can make sure that being in the middle of this conflict can be turned into something positive for the EU, into a mediating role that they would like to have. That's something that we've also heard from German politicians saying that in a way they can talk to both sides, in a way they can try and find diplomatic channels, in a way they can try and find channels of communication. It is not something very easy to do, but that is the general perspective that we have here from Europe. So on the one hand, obviously concern. On the one hand, there is obviously preoccupation. There's obviously that sense that this could turn into something much bigger. On the other hand, lots of talk about what exactly Europe could do to try and prevent this from escalating any further. Again, the key word, if I had to use one, is restraint. That's what we're hearing from European officials.
Restraint, and there's just a lot of hope that this will work out somehow. But talking about the specifics that have been done, Iran wants the U.S. out of the region. NATO has suspended its training in Iraq. Take us through the specific actions that have been taken as far as the EU is concerned.
Well, I'll add one more of those actions. You already mentioned a couple, but I think it's important to stress that Germany, for example, also has been taking concrete actions. They decided to move a very small part of its already small contingent in Iraq to neighboring countries, to Jordan and Kuwait in particular. That is obviously a result of the increasing tensions in the region. We've heard other important elements that have been discussed and decided. I can tell you, for example, that Lufthansa, the German airline, has also stopped direct flights from Frankfurt to Tehran, something that other airlines are also discussing. So you can see that there is direct reaction from European countries as to what is happening, because they're also concerned about possible implications to their own citizens and to their own security. One element that we saw, for example, from Germany in a letter that was sent by the German foreign minister and the German defense minister to the German parliament, explaining that removal or that move of that small contingent of troops in Iraq, is that they fear about Iraq's instability. They fear that if Iraq becomes more unstable, if Iraq actually does get foreign troops to leave, that could actually play into the hands of the so-called Islamic State, that could actually be used by the so-called Islamic State to maybe rebuild or even become stronger. And as you know, the so-called Islamic State has been a threat to Europe for a very long time now, so that's something that is of particular concern to European leaders. So you can see we're talking here about a conflict that has many different dimensions. We're talking here about the situation between Iran and the United States. We're talking here about the stability of Iraq. We're talking here about how this could affect the wider Middle East region. We're talking about how this could also affect, for example, Europe, how this could be dealt with also diplomatically. So there are many, many different levels that have to be considered in this particular conflict, and that's why European leaders in particular, but I'm sure other countries in the world as well, have been trying to ask for restraint and de-escalation, and have been trying to make sure that they can, in many ways, try and open channels of communication. I'll give you one concrete example, Gifty, how this is concrete, in a concrete way happening. German Chancellor Angela Merkel will be traveling on Saturday to Russia to talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin. As you know, Russia plays a very important role in the Middle East, in various of these countries in the Middle East, and Germany is in a particular good position to talk to Russia. That has to do with the fact that Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, and Vladimir Putin, the Russian President, have a very long-standing relationship. They've both been in power for a very, very long time, and they know each other very well, even though when they might have differences on a wide range of issues. So Germany sees itself in a position to, for example, talk there, to try and make sure that Russia could try and play some role in de-escalating tensions. Whether that will work out, it's another matter, because in the Middle East you have many interests and many problems as well.
So you've mentioned whether that will work, which is another part of the conversation, but generally what is expected in the next few days and after Angela Merkel's planned meeting with Russia's President Putin?
You have another meeting coming up at the European level. The European Union foreign ministers, they're also trying to coordinate their positions. You can understand that it's a bit difficult to coordinate positions among 28 different EU members. That's something that at least they're trying to do, to see how the European Union as an institution can try and help to de-escalate the tensions in the Middle East. The new European Commission, for example, has presented itself as a geopolitical commission, and as such they view themselves as maybe playing a very important role in trying to find those channels of communication that I've been talking about. Then you have the meeting on Saturday between Angela Merkel and Vladimir Putin. What exactly is expected there? European officials have not been giving many details, but that is not unusual, because in these kinds of negotiations, when you're talking about tensions, when you're talking about different strategies, they prefer to simply give a broad idea of what's going to be discussed and then discuss the details maybe privately. What they have said so far is that they're going to talk not only about Iran and Iraq, they're going to talk about other conflicts as well, bilateral issues, but let's not talk about this differently. It's absolutely clear, Gifty, that the issue that's at stake, the issue that they're going to be discussing first and foremost are the current tensions between Iran and the United States and what different countries can do to try and make sure that it doesn't escalate any further and that we don't have any type of bigger war that can affect not only the countries involved but also other countries as well.
Very complicated situation indeed, and even though the U.S. and both the U.S. and Iran have said that they don't want war, it doesn't look very good at this point. Thomas, walk us through how ordinary people in Germany and indeed in the EU have reacted to this, considering cases from the past. I mean, we know what happened with Saddam Hussein, we know what happened with Libya and the aftermath. How are people on the streets reacting to this story?
In a way, this is a story that up to now is seen a bit far away as something that is happening in a different part of the world. So it's not something where many people think that it can affect Germans directly right now. But at the same time, and I think it's important to stress this, Germans who are internationally aware do view this with concern, do see that this could escalate further, do see that this could end up in a spiral of violence from different sides that could potentially affect internationally. It could not only affect the United States and Iran or Iraq, but that it could potentially also affect Europe and other regions of the world. So I say that there is concern. There is concern also about what exactly can be done to prevent this, because it is very interesting to see the reactions coming from different countries, those reactions that we've been discussing about, Gifty, restraint, trying to get some form of de-escalation, trying to open channels of communication. But that's only one step. It has to be met also with diplomatic actions that can actually change the way this is developing and change the way this conflict is moving forward. So I would say all in all, there is first and foremost concern among Germans, among Europeans, but there's also a wait-and-see approach, in particular regarding how this can move forward and what European leaders could do to try and prevent this from escalating any further.
Hopefully diplomacy works and cool heads prevail. That's what everybody is calling for. We don't want, I mean, the world doesn't need another war. Thomas, thank you so much for coming through with that report and analysis. Thomas Sparrow is political correspondent with our partners DW. He joined us all the way from Berlin. Well, we're learning that President Donald Trump is about to address the nation. Well, let's take you on social media, because there's been some very interesting reactions, especially from the from all of you from across the world. Let's get on Twitter and find out what people are saying. Well, this one is tweeting at Dion, says, war is not funny, war is not a joke, war destroys the future, think about the children, where is the love? Hashtag prayer for peace, think about humanity, hashtag World War III, hashtag Iran versus USA. Well, those hashtags have been trending as well on social media. Series is tweeting at Jean Plumps, says, this is the saddest thing I came across. This is not funny. People are dying. People died in Iran. American soldiers died, and many more to lose their lives. I'm beginning to hate this world. Earth used to be beautiful. Hashtag Iran versus USA. Hashtag World War III. And Sadia Iqbal is tweeting us. Sadia Iqbal BN says, war is not a joke. It's destruction. Iran attacked U.S. military bases in Iraq. It has been confirmed that Iran's Air Force has taken off from its bases. This risks becoming a full-scale war between the U.S. and Iran. Hashtag Iran attacks, hashtag Iran versus USA, hashtag World War III, at Tariq Fatah. And these are all in reaction to a post. Someone posted something from the movie that seemed to be mocking the situation, and that's the sort of response that is coming on the back of it. Some more of your reactions. Say no to war. That's also a post on social media. Ayejia say Posik tweeting at Kwame_Age says, pray for humanity and say no to World War III. Life is precious. K is tweeting at K Poison. It says, Can't America just hand over Trump to the Iranians to end all this drama? World War III, hashtag World War III. It's not like they like their president, and it's even a few months to their election. It won't hurt much, he says. Khalid Najjar says war is not a joke. Remember Palestine, Syria, and Iraq and Yemen. World War III, hashtag World War III. Kobe Avenue, tweeting at Avenue_Kobe says, me realizing we're gonna have to study hashtag World War III for history now, and he posted that with a photo. Malau Khan, tweeting at Malau Khan 17, I hope we pray that there will be no World War III because all countries in the world will suffer. War is not a joke. War is destruction. Remember Syria, Palestine, and Iraq. He has an emoji, a broken heart emoji. Hashtag World War III, World War III, Malau Farm. Well, in the last few days, oil prices have hiked to some of the highest and could affect how much you buy your petrol or diesel or how much you pay for public transport here in Ghana. And this is what brings us again to the concerns being raised here in Ghana as the U.S. and Iran engage in what looks like the brink of a deadly war. Like I indicated to you, and we've read some of the tweets, World War III has already been trending on social media, although both countries say they don't want it. We'll be talking to Duncan Amwa, Executive Director for the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers, on what Ghana should be doing as far as the rippling effect is concerned. In the meantime, international relations analyst Dr. Vladimir Enchudanso is warning of the country's defense agreements being used, that it could be a possible target if Ghana is not, does not consider it carefully.
Specifically in direct relations to Ghana, it means the same as it means to any other country around, because what is going to happen is that Iran has several options: a direct war, which will be very apocalyptic and insane, or a diffused kind of terrorist activities throughout the world, targeting American interests and American installations, and therefore allies of the Americans also would be targeted, like Saudi Arabia, Israel. And therefore, what we can see is an unstable world, perhaps that can lead to any other thing else. But the instability in the world means that Ghana will also suffer the consequences of instability, like oil price hikes, the space war kind of, which we now call the cyber warfare. And so if one thinks that Ghana is in the ambit of NATO or the West, they can hack most of our installations and make them impotent. And I can foresee that this is what is going to happen, a kind of diffused, we'll call it low-intensity war, and it's no longer low intensity because it's a high-profile kind of war where you don't need numbers to fight them. You don't need several ammunitions to fight. You need artificial intelligence to do that. And that is the seventh generation of kind of warfare that we're going to have. And I believe the Iranians are capable of that. They are very good at hacking. They are very good. They are very good in that. They've done that to the U.S. before. The U.S. has retaliated before. And we are going to see that a lot. The U.S. now has what we call the cyber squad, or a squad. The cyber space squad has even now been turned into a complete command, just like the African command or air command. So it's a big command. A command means a command. And it means that soldiers just dress up and go and fight hacking. We are in that era. And I believe that terrorism is going to fester the more. The killing of Soleimani is one of Americans' footprints. They helped Osama bin Laden and they killed him. They helped Saddam Hussein, they killed him. General Ziem, they did. And so it is becoming a trademark. And I think people are angered by it. And especially in the Middle East, American foreign policy has completely misfired. It means one or two things. The first implication is that the Iranians or any other anti-American group might think that Ghana is in the ambit of the U.S., and we need to be very careful. Two, if they are convinced that these bases or whatever agreement we have signed with the Americans are being used as platform for attacks on them, they would look at Ghana as an enemy, and that's normal in international law. I mean, if your base or your country is being used as a platform for attack against my country, you are also a target. And so these are the areas where we should be very careful as to how we allow the Americans to use their lily pad which they have here for anything at all.
International relations analyst Dr. Vladimir Enchidan, so they're speaking to Daniel Dazi earlier on the Super Morning Show. We've also been talking to Duncan Amwa regarding the rippling effect on fuel prices. He's executive director for the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. Listen.
Tensions are rising in the Middle East because of the disagreement or the war between the United States and Iran. Tell us from where you sit what the implications are for us here in Ghana.
We think it is high time the Ghanaian government get some needed resources for institutions like BOST to at least import something that will give Ghana some fuel security. If you look at the way the tensions are escalating, Iran has indicated they are willing to target 300 different sites of the United States. The US is also saying 52 sites of Iran would go up. You don't know when any of them will make, the first step, and you definitely can imagine what the implications will be on fuel prices. Just the killing of Soleimani has seen fuel prices gone up by some 2-3% globally. We are quite certain that if the tensions do not de-escalate anytime soon, fuel prices may get to a point where it becomes probably double what it is today. And we think that Ghana should not sit and be caught ball watching. As much as possible, we should take advantage of the fact that we have enough storage space. If hedging was also an option, at this point you could do a +5 with the international market, so that if prices were to soar above what we anticipated for 2020, then Ghanaians could be at least cushioned. I do not think that we should sit and wait for things to get from bad to worse before we come back to complain or throw our hands in despair. We have the options at our disposal now. The issues are going back and forth, but one can clearly see the Iranians are not backing down. If you heard, they're actually putting a bounty of some $80 million. And clearly it tells you the situation in Kenya, for instance. It tells you that these Iranians and the Islamic world or the Arab community are clearly looking for a certain revenge posture. It will be quite unfortunate if we sit here and allow events to overtake our planning. So we think that government should make sure that BOST do get some money, at least in the immediate circumstances, to bring in some strategic stock, and then also work hard enough to bring Temoyo refinery on stream. As an oil producing nation, we could have been self-sustaining without depending on the international market if the refinery was working. Unfortunately, the refinery, as we speak, is giving us a zero output. So we would insist that whatever needs to be done to get Temoyo refinery up and running within the next few days, we should do so that if we are not even able to bring in finished products, whatever we produce locally, we don't need to export it back to the UK to go back for the finished product. We can refine some here and take some from the Ivory Coast and the neighboring countries if the international dynamics become quite ugly, as we are seeing.
What information do you have on the stocks at BOST?
It will be difficult at this point for any Ghanaian to wait on BOST to come to our rescue. The last time we checked, they don't have a single liter of strategic stock. In fact, they are not even bringing products for a while now. We believe strongly that the government may need to invest in them at this point, get them the needed resources to at least bring something to cover for your strategic stock position. If it's between the 6 to 8 weeks, at least you cover for 2 months, knowing very well that if the tensions do not de-escalate anytime soon, you would still be able to have something to fall back on. But as it stands, BOST doesn't look like it can sustain us if fuel or products do not come in, on a day-to-day basis as we have currently.
The local currency is also not doing well against the dollar. What would be your projection in the light of the performance of the cedi against the dollar and the situation in the Middle East for the next week or so? What will be happening in the oil front?
You see, Fred, one thing that we often do argue for government to ease down on taxes has to do with the fact that when world market prices go up, because you're a producer nation, your incomes or revenues also do go up. So it is not the case that because it's gone up, Ghana is losing. What you're also producing and exporting, those incomes would go up. And so we would expect that once government revenue goes up, there will be some attempts to use a bit of it to offset some of the taxes that we have asked government to review on a number of occasions. If the government decided to do away with the special petroleum tax because of the cedi's poor performance and world market issues, I'm sure the oil marketing companies will be quite happy. What we have seen in recent times, where we've even gone down on the price stabilization and recovery levy, which the president authorized personally, which is good. We do think that the energy ministry, the finance ministry should be working at a more sustainable pricing point where we can ease down on the levels of taxes as we have currently. If we do not ease down on these taxes and the cedi continues to depreciate and world market prices are also soaring, it may get to a point where fuel prices may just become unbearable for the Ghanaian pockets, and we do not think that we should get there. We need to start planning now. At what point would we ease down? If it goes to 70, if it goes to 80, if Plat went above 700, 800 per metric, we should have that plan in place so that once government knows if crude was going to 80, my revenue side would be enhanced. So I need to find a way to ease down on the taxes. We should be able to have the dual pricing mechanism as we've proposed in the past at this point.
First speaking there to Duncan Amo, Executive Secretary of COPIC.